I oftentimes am struck with this idea of how do you love yourself when you know society hates those parts of who you are. I didn't think to hate being black, right? I didn't think to hate being queer. It was what was associated and attached to those things that you start to learn and that people start to remind you of the older you get. The good thing is the older you get, the more you really start to figure out that those aren't things to hate about yourself.
One of the most important elements of hope is when a person grows from being who it is that they could be to walking into the fullness of their potential, to be unapologetically strong, unapologetically bold. That is when you see hope come into fruition and the person becomes the embodiment of then hope for others, the example of what you can become if only you trust the process and you never back down from your personal evolution. On today's episode, I am so excited to sit down with a person. I wish I could say that he is an old friend, but the truth is he's like an old stranger that I kind of know who has done incredible things. And as I have got a chance to watch from afar, I have been blown away by how unapologetically incredible and powerful as an advocate and so many things that he is. And now he's even a little bit of a reality TV star. So at this point, he's just unapologetically amazing in every direction. So I want to introduce to some and to reintroduce for others who may already know him. Preston Mitchum, welcome to Hope Rising.
Thank you. So, what a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We got to take people like behind the curtain, right?
Mhm.
So, Kent State University, right?
Yeah.
This is circa 2005, somewhere around there, right?
Yeah.
Preston was actually my resident. I was a residence assistant in the halls. And it was actually, and this is a whole conversation which we may or may not get into, it was actually the worst year of my entire life. I fell apart that year. So I barely got a chance to know most of the residents, and I don't really feel like we ever had much of any conversations at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I remember several years later, we were just Facebook friends, and I started to just watch things you would post and watching how you were moving and realizing that there was this giant that was living a couple of rooms down, and I never knew who you were. So for someone who doesn't know you, how do you introduce yourself to people?
My heart is so full already. It is interesting to me being at Kent State. The reality is, if you were black, I'm at least say hi to you, wave
Right.
to you in some respect, because it's not a lot of us. But you're right. Like, we really didn't get a chance to really know each other. But I always knew your presence, and so just thank you for inviting me here today. So I always introduce myself pretty consistently. I always say I'm a Black queer advocate, attorney, and activist hailing from Ohio and living in Washington, D.C. And I tend to point to those things specifically because, listen, I am like very unapologetically Black and queer. There are two identities that mean the world to me.
And they're both bold identities.
Look, they're bold identities. It's really how I built my politics, my political acumen, and just really started how I loved on myself over time. And I think those two things for a while were the parts of myself I hated the most. And as I become older, I really start loving on them every single day. And you can't tell me about being Black and queer now. Like, those are the things that I love about myself. And I'm an advocate. Like, advocacy is just what I do. It's who I am. It's the words that I live by. It's really how I think about how people move throughout space and time. Activism, for me, it's like, how could you not be an activist? I think some people have a misconceived notion of what activism is. And I share every day, like, all of us are activists. We're just activists for very different things. Whether we agree or disagree with what we're activating basis for. And then an attorney, because I've spent way too much money to not talk about it. So those are the three things I always really say, but strongly connected to my identifiers as well.
Okay, so we already got to just deep dive into this, right? Because you said something that was so profound. How many people have a part of themselves that they hate, or something that they identify with that they hate or they despise? And if they could just learn to lean into that area and embrace that area, they end up walking into the fullness of their power and their influence and their authority, right? Speak to that a little bit, because I know that you have been someone who has, who has advocated for so many people, different types of people who feel like they don't have a voice. Right?
Absolutely.
How does a person begin to lean into something they so badly want to lean out of?
Ooh, it's a powerful question. Even I oftentimes am struck with this idea of, how do you love yourself when you know society hates those parts of who you are? Right? Oftentimes we don't know to hate ourselves, right? Like, it is society, it is people who are leaning into the aggressions, right? Like, not microaggressions, but aggressions.
All the way aggressions.
Right. That so many of us feel. Like, I didn't think to hate being Black, right? I didn't think to hate being queer. It was what was associated and attached to those things that you start to learn, and that people start to remind you of the older you get. The good thing is, the older you get, the more you really start to figure out that those aren't things to hate about yourself. If you're lucky, there are some people who very much grow up and still hate those very parts of themselves that society told them to hate. What I find particularly important is just to realize the main question of, who taught you to hate yourself, right? That's not my own question. That's not my own quote. I'm often reminded of people like Toni Morrison, who repeatedly always discuss, like, what does it mean to hate yourself? What does it mean to actually have, like, certain categories of white folks, of cis folks, of straight folks tell you are not good enough, you are not worthy enough, your skin is too dark, your wrist is too bent, right? Like, what does all of that mean? Malcolm X oftentimes discuss, right, the role of the media and how the media forces us to see parts of ourselves that we probably would love had they not called it ugly. And so for me, I just had to really just be like, you know what? If society is really forcing me to hate these parts, they got to be beautiful. They got to be good. And so usually I'm probably annoying about it now, because for me, like, this shirt intentionally says Black on it, right? Like, I have other shirts that says proud and queer, right? Like, and maybe I don't want to be a walking slogan, but at this point I'm going to do it anyway, because, I just know so much. I have fought the parts of myself, again, that I now find beautiful. And some of it I hate, that I was so reticent and many times resistant to it, because I knew it would make me not a fan favorite in rooms.
It's interesting, because shirt or not, when we walk in the fullness of our authority in life, we're going to be a billboard no matter what, right? Like, the way that you move in life, I don't care if you're wearing a t-shirt or a suit, you're walking with a message, and people are reading the message loud and clear. And I think that's so incredibly important. So many people are afraid to say out loud what it is that they're already saying silently.
Absolutely.
And there's power in just putting words to it, And so one of the things that I've got a chance to see in watching you move, again, from afar, is you are flourishing in so many different areas of life. I don't know how a person is a lawyer, first of all. So that's a whole type of thinking, a whole type of movement, right? You are into all this, civil rights work, where, again, you are in the trenches, but then you're also parts of designing clothes and doing and then you're filming reality TV. And I mean, we're seeing, like, different parts of you emerge. talk a little bit about that. How have you come into your own as a man, a well-rounded, trying different things, just how have you walked into that creativity in such a powerful way?
It's an interesting story. So I'm gonna give the easier version by starting with, in 2013, I was a law clerk for a brilliant Black woman. Her name is S. Pamela Gray. She's thankfully retired now because she gets to relax as much as she can and deserves. And Judge Gray would always tell me, she would sit me down in her chambers and she said, "You know what I want for you, Preston?" And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "I want you to focus." And I was like, what does that mean? Like, I'm insulted. Like, I thought I was focused, right? I'm like good. I have a bar license. I passed the bar, all these great things. And she's like, all that is cute. That's amazing.
Come on.
She's like, but I don't see focus. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Right. After like picking my job off the ground.
Right.
Like, what do you mean by, I have a lack of focus? Because the reality is I really did think I was focused. And she was like, well, let me explain to you what I actually mean by focus. You are doing 1,000 things well, and I cannot tell you what they're connected to. I just can't tell you what they're connected to.
Say that again, because somebody who's listening needs to hear it for themselves.
You do 1,000 things well, and I cannot tell what they're connected to. And of course, this is like older Black woman wisdom. So I know I have to soak it up, right? Like you're not saying it to insult me. It's rooted in love and care. And so, and she was like, I just pray for you every day. She was like, because I'm concerned that you are going to like lose your life early because I feel your stress because you're trying to do everything. And so from that moment forward in 2013, 2014, remember, this is like the height of Black Lives Matter. This is around the death of like Trayvon Martin, killing really of Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice. So it's so many things happening where I am trying to be involved and activated everywhere. And I'm stressed. My blood pressure literally was increasing. At the time, I was on 2 blood pressure medications. And I really started to...
You were on 2 blood pressure medications?
2.
I know how old you are. That don't make no kind of sense.
And I'm not even joking. I went to my doctor at the time. Well, I still have the same doctor, but I went to her at the time and she was like, you are bordering stroke levels. And that is not good. Not only obviously at all. She was like, but your age, you already have like things hereditary that's attached to this, right? Your race, like there are certain things you really have to pay attention to. And it made me just reflect back at my judge's comments. And so from that point forward, I kind of vowed that I would reduce a lot of work, reduce a lot of stress to the extent possible. And at the end of the day, everything I was going to touch was going to be connected, right? It was going to make sense. And so I tell people now, like, even though I'm in all of these different things, I guarantee you they all are connected and they make sense to exploring and getting people to explore who I am in ways that I never even really publicly got the chance to share with folks. And so I started to think about what I cared about, right? What I cared about a lot was the body. I cared about the law's reaction to the body, whether it was reproductive justice or abortion issues, whether it was police brutality, whether it was mental, physical, or emotional wellness or well-being. I cared a lot about like what the reaction to different things are. I cared a lot around the body in terms of how media saw Black folks, how media saw queer folks, and how it represented our body. And that it just made sense at that point to me. Like, I am going to be a vessel of actually communicating about the body in a variety of ways, right? And how people respond to our body and our bodies, right? And at the time, it wasn't lost on me that I was also a survivor of sexual assault. And so all of these things just kept compounding up, like why the body just matters, while being in touch and in tune with your body matters a lot. So that's really how I started to explore things related to like law and policy. Most of my work on law and policy is on reproductive health rights and justice issues, is on racial justice and police brutality, is on sexual assault and sexual violence. On the reality show, a lot of what I was discussing was about the body in many ways. And so that's really what connected. It was someone really sitting me down who loved me enough to tell me, to check me, to check me and to check on me.
There it is.
In such loving and courageous ways that I will always think about her until the day I meet our ancestors.
Mm. There's so much in what you just said, and we would do injustice to not unpack some of it, right? Because there's a lot of leaders who I think listen to this podcast, leaders in different realms and different worlds, business leaders, spiritual leaders, different leaders, right? One of the things that creates a great leader is a leader who is willing to submit to leadership. Right. A leader that is willing to take difficult truth, difficult criticism, internalize it, learn from it, and walk in it. And because you were willing to take constructive criticism, you now know how to give it and how important it is to give it to those who follow you.
Say
right?
that.
There's so much in that.
Yes.
And so I kind of want you to speak to that a little bit. Having powerful, mentors like that. What has that done for you? Because you don't walk in the circles that you walk in and think you're always going to be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
That's just not a thing, right? So what has being around so many powerful and influential people taught you about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness?
First of all, I pray I'm not the smartest person in any room I enter into. If I am, tell me so I can walk on out, right? Like, because what do I get to gain in that space, right? You can always still learn, but I never want to go into a room being like, you know what? I know I'm the smartest in here, right? Like, it doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel good. What I've learned a lot, one was that you don't know everything. That's probably the first thing I've learned. It's like, you don't know everything. And I'm always reminded of my grandmother who would say to me, like, baby, just keep living. Whatever you think you know now, just keep living.
That part.
And, that was clearly her way of telling me, like, you would know it all. And you're going to see soon enough that you don't know it all. And so that is what I've learned. I've learned so many things from them. But most of all, for me, what I really learned was just the importance of our elders, the importance of people who are older than you, who've lived a life different than you, maybe not better, maybe not worse, but it's just different than your own experience. And they have taught me so much of what I know about leadership, about love, about courage, about why I hate the concept of resilience, just about so many things. Like
you're gonna have to go back to that. So keep going. Then you're gonna have to go back to that.
I was really about to put a period there instead of a comma, but really just to say, like, I've just learned a lot about really love, right? And like what love actually looks like and means and how it shows up for people that you hear about.
That's good. Resilience.
It's interesting. So I have done speeches on this because there was something about it. So I want to first state, when people always talk about the beauty of resilience, no one ever means it in a harmful way. I recognize already that the intent is a beautiful intent. But the more I started to hear how resilient I was, there was something about it that I had an icky reaction to it. Because for me, and this is what it was telling me, not what they were trying to say. What it was really celebrating was that society has messed me up for so long and that I've somehow survived it. And for me, I was just over celebrating the struggle, over celebrating at least you made it, right? And I wanted to use that to start tearing down why we need to be resilient in the first place.
That's good. At least you made it.
Yeah, for me, I'm just like, I don't want to have to be resilient, right? There are many people who never have to be resilient, right? Because you think about resources and access and privilege and benefits. They don't have to be resilient, right? And it's always the same types of people who are usually resilient. They're usually Black folks, Indigenous folks, Latinx folks. They're usually poor folks or folks who, aren't economically franchised in many ways. They're usually folks who are formerly incarcerated. Like, it's always the downtrodden, always the marginalized identities and communities. And something about that feels like a slap in the face, because it doesn't teach me that you're trying to break down barriers in order for no one to have to be resilient. It's teaching me that you're going to celebrate me because at least I made it. And I'm tired of just making it.
That's so good. It's funny because you and I are both very controversial. Like you say stuff. I'm the same. I'm the same way though. I be saying stuff. I be making people mad. And it's interesting because I have worked with people who are the opposite of what you described, and I've seen them as resilient. But I see the other side of resilient being probably what people probably mean.
Right.
Not all of them. Some people mean what you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I think the other part of resilient is the life is not about to ease up. Life is about to keep lifing, and you're going to have to find some resilience to get through it, right? And I think that that's the part of it. But even that part, though, I agree with what you said. You can begin to identify so strongly with the struggle that you don't keep your eyes on the goal or keep your eyes on what is going well. You know, you're looking at the lack instead of focusing on the abundance that's already within you.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a good one. But since we're on controversial topics, I was, because, I do a great stalking job before I bring somebody on, right? And it was funny because your publicist was like, what questions do you think you'll ask? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'll give you the best I got. I'm going to try. Like, I don't know. Right. And so, but I always spend time just watching clips and stuff. What's your deal with Black excellence?
I knew this was going to come up. That is so funny. Listen, well, just know I'm always willing to roll with the punches. So no, it's funny. So I've had so much time to really wrestle with the concept of Black excellence. And I've realized I don't even know if my issue is with the quote, with the hashtag Black excellence, or if it's really with who we have deemed can be excellent.
Ooh.
And so for me, that is it, right? Like I think whenever we want to define something is good, right? Like I am literally wearing a shirt that's a sweatshirt that says educated Black man, right? Like most people would like, yes, hashtag Black excellence, right? So I get it. So it's not to say let's like remove or reduce or try to erase these accolades that many of us have worked really hard for. But it is to say the concept, I believe, of Black excellence should be more inclusive. And oftentimes it's simply not. Most of the time when people mention it, and when you even research it, it is someone who has to go above and beyond to be considered excellent, right? And I mean the Olympians, right? I mean the people who are trying to cure cancers. I mean the folks who may have 10 real estate properties. I mean people who have multiple degrees, right? Some of these categories I even fit within.
I was about to say, I just hear you describing yourself, but go on.
Yeah, and at the same time, I acknowledge fully that I should not be the only type of person that fits within these categories, right? I always describe my mother, right, who I saw in many ways work as hard as possible with 2 jobs, raising 3 kids, oftentimes a single parent, never went to college, graduated high school with a baby, right? She would never be under that hashtag under any sense of imagination, right? I think of so many people in my families and families that I know in Youngstown, Ohio, or Dayton, Ohio, both places that I grew up. That's just not the economy. It's not the environment. We are not going to see that in many of those spaces. And so when I think of things related to inequities and injustice and what I know systems have done to so many families who are folks of color, who don't have the ability to have generational wealth, many of them, most of them, unfortunately, because of those inequities, don't get the chance to achieve those heightened sense of successes. And so it made me and then started to make me very uncomfortable with what we meant by excellent and who defines it. And then oftentimes we started to just say it all the time that it meant nothing, right? Like it was like, what does that even mean? Bell Hooks has a quote, when she often says, if feminism can mean everything, it means nothing, right? And so I started to think about like these concepts related to Black excellence. I'm like, well, if it can mean everything, right? If it can mean like you're taking shots of vodka when you're doing it, or shots of tequila when you're doing it, or sipping coffee, or right? It's just like, if it's all these things, what does it actually mean? And I find the more you actually ask someone what they mean by it, they start to not know. They really start to not know. And so for me, I'm just like, well, if we want to use it, let's at least be over inclusive of who we consider excellent, because I know a lot of Black folks who are excellent and a lot of them don't meet those definitions.
That's so good. It's interesting because I started laughing when you said it. I was watching one of your videos again, doing a great stalking job. And as I heard you, I thought to myself, I secretly hate Black excellence too. Okay. Now, Not for the same reasons, but for the same reasons, right?
Mhm.
Because I have often been excluded from the list.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have often been excluded from the list, right? And part of the reason that people will point to, I'm a very like well-spoken, proper black man, and so people hear me talk a couple times and they just say you're not black enough, right? And
Yep.
so I was even thinking, even as we were talking at the very beginning, and you were like, well, I'll at least say what's up to, other people on campus, because we're black people. Yeah, but black people usually wouldn't say what's up to me on campus.
Yeah.
And so, and that's a whole story of
Mhm.
my life, because I remember, I grew up in this small town, mostly white town, and I was so excited to get to Kent State University, because even though Kent State is like 90% white, for me, that 10% was more black people than I'd ever been around in my life.
Right.
And I remember getting to campus and I was like, I'm about to have some black friends finally. And that was probably half the problem, that I was shucking and jiving saying I can't wait to, right? That was half the problem right there. That was it, right? And I remember getting to campus and being like, hey, and people would just be like, and now I'm at a place where, I'm all the way grown and people see me now as black excellence because of some of the things I've done and how I move and operate, but I often almost repel the concept, right? Like, but you really wouldn't have paid no attention until right now, where you see that I actually am doing something,
Absolutely.
and I didn't stand for the things that you thought I standed for then, right?
Absolutely, yeah. College to me is a fascinating moment. I mean, I know this is not the direct point, but like to me, college, particularly PWIs, are such a fascinating experience when it comes to Black folks who attend predominantly white institutions, because I do think it is like a small, interestingly enough, even when it's like 2,000 of us, it is still like a very specific moment if you don't know about the Divine Nine organizations, or if you're not affiliated with like Black United Students or Kent State NAACP or even the Kent African Student Association, right? Or Oscar Ritchie, right? It was like this was the way to be Black at Kent State. And so it's like if people did not see that you sat within that, it would, I agree, like I saw it, right? Like I would see that. And as someone who was very much involved, not only with like the Black orgs, but also with student government, like I would easily see it. Right. Like if I was just in student government at Kent State, I guarantee you no one would have, like they just wouldn't have. Right. And that's no disrespect. Right. We're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds.
At all. We're talking about kids. We're a bunch of kids.
Right. But I agree with you. Like I think hindsight is everything, because there are moments where I really look back and I'm like, wow, we could have been better. We could have just done better. Not that people were hostile or mean, but just weren't as inviting as many of us could have been.
Well, but I think that your intentional reflection is the point. That no 22-year-old is really going to have it all right and have it all figured out. But most 30, 40-something-year-olds are not going to reflect back and say, what can I still learn from him? What can I still learn from being her, right? That there is this very real ability for us to keep gleaning wisdom from our past, not just gleaning wisdom from the past, from our past. And that's what I see in you, is you're continuing to learn from everything you've walked in.
I love that. No, that's, I don't even know. I don't want to know what it's like if I can't be accountable to who I was. Right. And I think that's such an important thing, because none of us have it figured out. Right. If I don't have it figured out at almost 38, I certainly didn't have it figured out from 18 to 22.
Oh, no, that's right.
so it's a very real moment, though. Right. I realize we're all navigating and doing the best we can, recognizing we can all do better than that.
Absolutely. I think, I sometimes have to have conversations with that version of me, right? Because that version of me knew enough to look confident, but didn't know enough as to how to walk fully and boldly in who he fully was, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what I see that really made me want to talk to you today, because when I look at you, and maybe this is a facade, maybe this isn't really what's happening, but I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like a person who looks in the mirror, fully understands what he's looking at, has embraced it, and has said, let's go be great today. And I don't know a whole lot of people who do that day in and day out. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying you
Yeah.
always have courage and confidence, but that's what you look like, and it doesn't look fake. It looks real.
Yeah. Oh, means a lot. Oh my gosh. It was a struggle to get here. I just, even reflecting on who we used to be, I mean, I was closeted until senior year, right? And so I was, I think I want to shake my former self sometimes because I think I did a good job of pretending then too, frankly. But now it's real, and I'm grateful that it is real. Like, can I cuss on here, or are you gonna blank it out? What you?
I'll blank it out. I'll blank it out.
Because I can't lie. Sometimes I look in the mirror. I'm like, you are a bad bitch. Like, like I can't lie, and I can't think of a time that was consistent in my life, honestly. But there's just something about how good I feel about myself the past several years that I'm like, even in my mistakes, even when I don't have it figured out, there's just something that's so beautiful being like, but you will figure it out.
Come on.
And that was not me. And it took a lot. I mean, and I will say this, I feel like I've both been confident most of my life. I've been, even with a lot of setbacks, I've always knew who I was and whose I was, and it helped me out a lot.
Come on.
Knowing I had a lot of community and a lot of support. But there's something that's so beautiful that I'm like, you are good. You are good. You are here. People love you. The people who don't love you still secretly love you. And you are going to be all right. And, and it feels good to just be able to say that and to mean it.
And to mean
like,
it.
not just say it, but to mean it and to feel it.
That's so good. And I agree. I agree with what the judge said to you before, right? Because if you stand for everything, you really ultimately stand for nothing. I also think that some of the principles that you're speaking apply to everyone, right?
Absolutely.
And that there is something there's this entire world who are victims of this thing called imposter syndrome, right? To where you are climbing the mountain, but you're sinking on the inside, and you never really find balance. You never really find that thing inside that says, no, I am who I'm working to be. I am becoming that, and I don't have to play pretend. And so when you say you look in that mirror and you mean it, do you know how many executives don't have that? How many millionaires don't have that? Like that's not confidence. That's spiritual, right? That is like a way deeper thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I feel like it is so many versions of my grandmother coming up and her mother coming up. So a couple things. I would have friends who would say to me, they'll see me come into a meeting, and I may wear a suit if I want to, right? Like I'll still look good and presentable, but I may be wearing a hat, or just like I love a hat, or a fitted hat, or just something. But I'm like,
I was surprised you didn't come on with the hat.
Oh, it's right here just in case. Just in case. Look, actually, we can talk about this later too. But I will do that because I know some people have this thing like, about how you dress. All of that. And my substance is great. And at the end of the day, it's like, I don't have time to fight what you view about my appearance. Like, you may not like my jeans, my shirt. There may be a variety. You may not even like my suit if I'm coming in a suit. So, but what I can control is the information that I know I have and what I know. My friends joke with me because one of the funniest things one of my friends said to me is like, Preston, you do not have an imposter syndrome. You know what I would call you? What you have? The Little Richard syndrome.
Okay.
like you are fine. Like you are gonna be good. And I was like, but if y'all only saw what it took to get there, and I have to, and not to sit in it, but I have to remind people, and sometimes remind myself, like, if y'all know about Youngstown, Ohio, look it up. Like, I grew up in the hood of hoods, and where one time the murder capital was worse than the birth rate, right? Like, people were dying more than they were being born. And moved to Dayton, Ohio, which was just a step above, like not much better. Right, experiencing like domestic violence in homes, from my father to my mother, being sexually assaulted by my stepfather. Right, like I had to really, like, be confused about my own sexuality growing up and what that meant, and thoughts of bullying and suicide. I was in therapy since I was 11 years old from a lot of those things. And so when people tell me, sometimes there are people who just think I got it and had it together. And I don't even fight them. I'm just like, you know what? Whatever version that you see of myself, if that's what you think it's always been, more power to you, right? What I know is this person is because of what he's been through. And I should have never had to go through those things. And in an eerie way, I'm grateful for him because I believe at least, that I probably would not be the person I am today. And so, when you talk about what I think your concept of resilience means, right? There is a part of that that's embedded into that. And I'm in many ways indebted to it. And so I always discuss like imposter and Little Richard, because a lot of Black folks especially, don't get the chance to feel confident about who they are because society always demands that we don't. Because if not, we're going to be too arrogant, too cocky, too confident. And it's why you'll rarely hear me call myself or other people humble or to be humble. Because in my experience, only really communities of color get told to be humble, right? We're the ones who are mostly told we're getting too big for our britches. And I'm just like, you don't have to like humiliate someone or try to lessen someone in order to get them to practice humility or being like grateful for what they have and who they are. And so I am always going to lean into rooms head first because at this point in my life, it's what I know.
It's interesting. It was, I want to say 3 years ago or so that I really found a new relationship with that word humble, because I hated the word humble from my childhood, because again, it was always something that was used to squelch my fire. Right. Yes. And any time that I found confidence in an area, the confidence was just seen as arrogance. And the reality is when you're growing up with domestic violence and you have constantly, you're getting beat down and told what you're not. Yeah, you're going to try to become confident in an area, so confident that you can overcome. Right.
Absolutely.
I heard this definition of humility, that it is taking up one's God-given space. Meaning you were put on the earth to be all of something, and that humility is not trying to be outside of that bubble, outside of that circle, right? Because now you're infringing on someone else. But it's also not to shrink, because shrinking sets you up for failure, because what's going to happen is I'm going to be too small, and then I'm going to get angry, and then I'm going to explode outside of the box, right? And so if you could learn how to take up your God-given space and to walk in the fullness of the boldness of who you were born to be, that's purpose in a nutshell. And that gave me a different feeling about what humility could be for me.
I love that. I love that so much. I mean, I'm glad that you knew you needed this reframe, because sometimes I will admit, if something has like jaded me for so long, I don't even reframe it. I just get rid of it.
That makes sense.
So like, I really do love this reframe though, right? Because oftentimes maybe the word isn't the issue, right? It's just how the word has been used against other people. Right. I mean, it's kind of like the ally co-conspirator thing for me. Like, there are many people who very much believe like, we should not be an ally. Allies and, a verb, and people aren't, they're not action enough. And so we need to be co-conspirators. And I'm also kind of like, or the issue is not the word itself, actually. It's that people are actually not allies, right? And that they need to be allies. So I actually really do appreciate that reframe.
Well, when you're a coach, you have to live it. You have to live it before you coach it, right? And so the majority of my life now, mindset wise, is go confront it and then put it in its place, right? And so for me, I try to not let there be anything that lingers anywhere, because if it lingers for me, it festers, and if it festers, it grows, and if it grows, it destroys me later. That's been my pattern. So I try to seek it out. I try to examine it, figure out what that thing is and is not for me, and then I redefine it accordingly, right? Or I discard it accordingly, so it's discarded somewhere where it's not coming back, if that makes sense, right?
It does. I love that.
So this has been, such a great conversation. I want to make sure there's like a couple more things I want to get to before we get off of here. So this is the crazy part. I did not realize you were doing a TV show when I hit you up and asked you if you wanted to be on the podcast, right? I didn't know I don't have cable, right?
No,
so
right.
like I'm doing my research and I was like, wait, what? And then I'm watching you do all your interviews and I'm trying to find clips and I was like, yo.
Yeah.
So can you break us down? How did this come? Summer House Martha's Vineyard. How did that come about? I know you finished season 1 and season 2 is in the works right now. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. It is interesting now because mostly when you Google my name, TV personality comes up, and I'm like,
sure does.
Google, I'm a little insulted.
I said TV personality. Excuse me.
Right? I was like, because I've worked for a long while before this moment, but I understand how search engines go. So, but no, so I am excited. So Summer House Martha's Vineyard really follows a group of 10 plus Black friends and friends who vacation oftentimes on Martha's Vineyard in the summertime. And you just get a lot of things related to us, right? Like decadent dinners, you get some romance, some not so romantical situations. And you also just get a lot of friendship and family and love with a hint of drama. So you're right.
That's always a given.
The hint, right? So season 1 is currently available now on Peacock. Folks can still stream it. It is available everywhere on Peacock. And then season 2 is in the works. We premiere early spring. And so I can't wait for season 2 to come out as well. But how it really started was a group of us who also happen to be on the show now. We're just on the vineyard in the summertime, like July 4th weekend. Mm-hmm. And for folks who don't know, Martha's Vineyard is really a special place. I mean, it is in many ways an oasis unto itself. And I never heard of the Vineyard until I moved into the nation's capital. It was just, I think in many ways you have to have access to the space. And sometimes access just means knowing about it.
Absolutely.
But in the summertime, the Vineyard has a legacy of being Black, of having a lot of Black visitors. There's a lot of Black folks who own houses on the island because it was one of the first places you could actually purchase in the United States. And so it's really a beautiful setting and an oasis, as I stated. And we were there July 4th going to an all-white party because a lot of Black folks love all-white dinners and linen.
We love that. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a permanent thing.
And we posted a picture. So Jordan in particular, one of my castmates and the person I'm closest with, posted a picture when we were about to go out. And someone she was connected to messaged her about it and was like, hey, I'm working with the casting director for this potential new show. We thought it was nonsense because like who just messages someone?
I don't know.
Whatever. Yeah, it's just like whatever. That's not true. None of us wanted to do reality TV, right? And next thing you know, we go back to our respective places and she gets a follow-up message and was like, I know this sounds like a joke, but we're kind of serious. And then after that, they connected us to like casting folks, to network folks. And after what feels like 1,000 interviews later, we ended up being cast on the show. And so it was, I've realized over time though, like, because I am a reality TV junkie. And I have realized over time that you probably don't want people on a reality show who did want to be on reality TV because it could come off a bit more disingenuous. Mm-hmm. So the truth is what you see is truly what you get on this show, the good, bad, and ugly.
That's a great thing though, because that we need more authenticity in it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I can't imagine what it would be like to have the cameras watching you. The only perspective that I have, right? This is my 5 seconds of fame, right? Yeah. So I want to say I was about 22 and I was working at a summer music camp for teenagers. And one of the little girls was being followed by Nickelodeon. So they tell us like this, the Nickelodeon is coming. They'll be there one day. And I'll never forget. Now, maybe I'm saying too much. I'm not saying this is what your experience is like. I'm just telling you what my experience was like. It doesn't sound like this is what yours was like, right? So I'm in a room and the girls in there, the camera people are in there, the producers, and I'm just being me. And I'm full of one-liners and stuff. And I'm like, one thing you got to understand, and we got to make sure. And and I'm doing a me, right? And they were like, wow, you are powerful. And I said, thank you so much. They were like, all right, could you say it again?
Uh-huh.
And I said, one more time. So could you say that all again? We want to catch you from a
Mhm.
different angle. I said, I thought y'all were trying to get Rhea. Oh.
Yep.
And at that point, I was like, it was like, oh, I got a chance to see behind the lid, but I only got 24 hours of it. That's...
Well, you know what? That is also still true in some moments, because that's the thing, because you are already yourself and you're just trying to just move as yourself.
Right.
It does feel weird because it's like not a take two. Like I'm like, excuse me. It is actually hilarious when those moments do happen, because I'm just like, I don't remember what I said. I don't think it's gonna come off the same way. But thankfully, it's few and far between.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, it's really if they really know they're getting something they're like, oh wait, this is actually great. Let's make sure we get it. Get it. So rest assured, if they do that, it's because they're like, it's actually good, and I really do want it. But I tell you, when you're in the moment, it's like now it feels fake.
Right. That's so good. So in your real life, you are making moves and shaking some things. And I know that in February, this episode is coming out probably in March, but you have just, as the listeners are listening, just launched a new line. And I don't want to get off the interview without you getting a chance to talk about it, promote it, because I want to make sure people can support. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. So I'm the CEO of PDM Consulting LLC, and we're a Black, queer owned and operated company that really focus on a few areas: advocacy and policy strategy and solutions, organizational change management and restructuring, and then also facilitations and trainings alongside justice, equity, and diversity and inclusion edits. When I was doing all of this work,
that was a lot of words.
It's a lot of words.
A lot of words.
And if it needs support, hit me up. But a lot of it is when I started to do all of that work, and then of course appearing on TV, I started to think I was funny. I was like, I think I'm actually funny. Like, I don't care what anyone else says. I think I'm funny. But what I noticed is a lot of people watching the show really loved my one-liners, and there were just certain things that I guess I said that people thought I was joking about, but I was quite serious about. And they were like, you should really turn this into like branded products. And I did. And so I was really excited to work with a great company called Diversity Merch on the Preston Mitchum collection. And it's a collection of hats, shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, like coasters, canteens, like so many things that you can get. And during Black History Month, we were excited to launch our hat collection. For folks who know me, I wear a variety of hats, from wide brim, fedoras, dad hats, corduroys, etc. And one of my favorite quotes, and it's also the tagline of the merchandise company and the consulting company, is "For angelic troublemakers everywhere." That was a quote, the longer quote, from Bayard Rustin, a Black queer activist and the 1963 organizer of the March on Washington, stated, "We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers." And so, I was joking about this hat, but this hat says "For angelic troublemakers everywhere." You'll find a variety of colors, sizes, among other things. But really, that's the Black History Month collection, really an ode to someone who obviously never had the chance to meet, but someone who I deeply respect and look up to his work in honor of Bayard Rustin. So that's a little bit about the company and a little bit about the merchandise.
I love it. So if you guys are listening and maybe you are somebody who needs his services, you need his support, you need his help, make sure that you reach out. You guys will see all the information and the links down below wherever you're listening and are watching today. By the way, if you haven't shared this yet, do you hear how good this interview has been and you have kept it to yourself? You know that ain't right. So please do share it. Please let a friend know. If you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be watching or listening. So Preston, before I let you go today, there is one question that every guest is asked here on the show. So I want you to imagine that it is 100 years from now, and there is a museum that exists, and it is a museum of popular culture. And someone walks into the museum, and when they get inside, there is a room marked Hope. Inside of that room, there are time capsules. And there is a time capsule with your name on it. And inside of it, there are pictures of you standing in courtrooms and pictures of you doing different types of advocacy and legislation. And now there's merchandise and books you gonna write someday, and just so many things of your life. But the most important thing that they find is a clip. And on this clip is you describing to this person who is in need of hope what hope means to you. What would you say that hope is?
Wow. To me, hope is believing in the impossible. To me, hope is believing in yourself when people told you you cannot do something. To me, hope is imagining a better world that is free, more liberated and liberatory, that is really touching the facets of every single person who you know and love, that's really supporting marginalized communities and identities, that is praying for a world where we don't have to be dichotomous, where we can have abundance, where we realize scarcity is a farce and it's something that's been lied and fed to us time and again. But really, hope is you. And truly, hope is you creating a world that you know you are destined to see, but folks before you have not been able to create for you because you were the only person who could create that for yourself.
Ooh, so good. Go ahead and drop that mic then. Ugh. Well, let me just let you know my life is more abundant. And so are the lives of everyone who has listened and watched today. More abundant, more full because of this conversation, because of your perspectives, your insight, and your wisdom. And so if you guys have enjoyed this today, please do leave your comments. Let us know what was your greatest takeaway. What were the gems that you took from this? And then please make sure you go follow Preston, follow him in his business, connect with him. Make sure you check out season 2 of Summer House Martha's Vineyard, and then just find Preston whatever he does next, because I'm pretty sure he's going to branch into some other things y'all ain't ready for yet either.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
All right, Preston, thank you so much for joining us today, for joining me today. It has been truly an honor. I really actually mean that. It has been an honor that you took the time to spend time with me. So thank you for this.
No, 20 years later, but we made it.
Yes, I love it. I love it. All right, guys. Well, I hope that what you got out of this conversation is that here's my biggest takeaway. At the very beginning of this interview, he said there was something on the inside of me that I hated, that I loathed, that I wanted nothing to do with. But when I leaned into the discomfort, I eventually found my power. I eventually found my purpose. I eventually found my pathway that I'm here on the earth to walk in. And to me, there's no greater inspiration than that. So I hope you guys got everything that you needed. Make sure that you join us again next Monday on Hope Rising, where the unfulfilled go for fulfillment and the uninspired go for inspiration. We'll see you soon.